Hey guys, tonight we are stepping out of our togas and into the steamy, bustling, and surprisingly social world of ancient Rome's public baths. Imagine this: you've finished your day's work. The sun is beginning its slow descent over the seven hills, and the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke, baking bread, and perhaps a hint of, well, less pleasant ancient city aromas. You're heading to a place that's part spa, part gym, part community center, and, as we'll explore, a whole lot like your favorite social media feed, just with more nudity and olive oil. Getting clean was almost a side benefit to the main event: the schmoozing, the gossiping, the deal making. Honestly, with the hygiene standards and medical knowledge of the time, you probably won't survive this experience without catching something a Roman doctor would treat with a shrug and a recommendation for more wine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. So drop a comment below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself approaching one of the larger public bath complexes. A thermae, perhaps one of the grand imperial ones if you're in Rome itself, or a still impressive, if slightly smaller, version in a provincial town. The sheer scale of the building is striking. Its high walls of brick-faced concrete, perhaps adorned with arches and columns, hinting at the vast, echoing spaces within. Even from outside, you can hear a dull roar of activity, the indistinct murmur of hundreds of voices, punctuated by shouts, laughter, and the occasional splash. The air around the entrance is already humid, carrying the mingled scents of warm water, fragrant oils, and perhaps the tempting aroma of snacks being sold by nearby vendors. It's usually mid-afternoon, the most popular time for Romans to visit the baths, a period of leisure after the main business of the day is concluded, typically between the 8th hour around 2 p.m. and sunset. At the entrance, you pay your fee. The balneum merces? For most public baths, this was surprisingly affordable, often just a quadrans, the smallest Roman coin, ensuring that almost everyone, rich or poor, could partake in this essential daily ritual. This affordability is a mainstream historical fact. Roman baths, particularly the grand thermae, but also the more numerous smaller balneae, were a ubiquitous feature of Roman urban life, found in nearly every town and military fort across the vast expanse of the empire line, from Britain to Syria. Your small coin clinks into the attendant's hand, and you pass through the doorway into a different world. Your first stop is the apoditerium, the changing room, and room hardly does it justice. In the larger thermae, this could be a vast, noisy hall, its walls lined with rows upon rows of open niches or recesses. The loculi, where you'll stow your clothes and belongings. The air here is thick with the smell of damp linen, stale sweat from earlier patrons, and the more pleasant aroma of the various perfumed oils that people will use later. It's already a hive of social activity, men or women, as some baths had separate sections or different hours for genders, though historians still argue about the exact social dynamics and levels of intermingling between different classes and how strictly gender separation was enforced at all times, and all establishments are in various states of undress. Greeting friends, exchanging news, their voices echoing off the high, vaulted ceilings. You find an empty niche and begin to disrobe. There are no private cubicles here. Undressing is a public, unremarkable affair. If you're wealthy, your personal slave, perhaps a capsarius whose specific job is to look after your clothes, will guard your belongings. If you're on your own, you might feel a flicker of anxiety. Clothes theft was a genuine and common problem in the apoditerium. So much so, in fact, that a rather quirky tidbit of Roman life involves people leaving defixiones, curse tablets, at the baths. These were thin sheets of lead, inscribed with appeals to various gods, asking for divine retribution against the unknown thief who made off with their tunic or sandals. Forget a strongly worded letter to the manager. Romans went straight to divine retribution for missing socks. Some might even pay a small fee to one of the bath attendants to keep a closer eye on their possessions. A sort of ancient locker insurance? Once you're stripped down, and yes, most people bathed nude, though some might wear a light loincloth called a subligaculum, You hand your clothes to your slave or carefully fold them into your niche. Now, unencumbered, you're ready to truly immerse yourself in the experience. But before you even hit the water, the social aspect is in full swing. You see a senator chatting animatedly with a merchant, a group of soldiers laughing boisterously in a corner, a poet perhaps trying to find a quiet spot to mentally compose. Though quiet spots are in very short supply. This is where you catch up on the latest news, the freshest gossip, the political whispers. Who's in favor with the emperor? What was the latest spectacle at the Colosseum like? Did you hear about Marcus's disastrous business venture? It's all here, unfiltered, live, and in person. The sheer sensory input is almost overwhelming. The noise is incredible, and it's like a modern gym, a bustling swimming pool, and a crowded food court all decided to have a very loud party in an enormous, echoey bathroom. You hear the rhythmic thud of balls from the palestra, the open-air exercise yard often attached to the baths, where men are engaged in wrestling, weightlifting, or various ball games. There's the constant splash and gurgle of water from fountains and pools, the scrape of strigils as bathers remove oil and dirt from their skin, the shouts of vendors hawking everything from snacks and drinks to massages and depilation services. Yes, hair removal, often with rather eye-watering enthusiasm. And underpinning it all, the ceaseless hum of human conversation, a rich tapestry of Latin, Greek, and perhaps a dozen other languages from across the empire. This, you realize, is indeed the ancient equivalent of scrolling through your social media feed. Here, you get your updates, you see who's connecting with whom, you observe the latest trends in hairstyles or lack thereof, and you make your own presence known. It's a place to see and be seen, to network, to reinforce social bonds, or even to forge new ones. The Roman bath complex wasn't just a place to get clean, it was an essential organ of Roman social, political, and economic life, a daily ritual that connected individuals from various walks of life in a shared, public experience. And you've only just taken your clothes off. The real journey through its steamy heart is yet to begin. As you stand there in the noisy, steamy apoditerium, the changing room we just navigated, surrounded by a sea of chattering Romans and the faint, lingering possibility of someone nicking your tunic, remember those rather dramatic curse tablets we talked about? You might start to wonder just how this colossal pleasure dome actually functions. All this water, all this heat, all these people, it's a logistical marvel. Where does the endless supply of fresh water for those inviting pools come from? And how on earth do they manage to heat some of these rooms to an almost tropical intensity, especially in the cooler climes of Britain or Gaul? Well, prepare to be impressed, because the engineering that underpinned your daily Roman bath experience was nothing short of genius for its time. Let's start with the water. Vast quantities were needed, not just to fill the pools, but also for fountains, flushing latrines, and general cleaning. This lifeblood of the baths was delivered by Rome's legendary aqueducts. These weren't just simple channels, they were monumental feats of civil engineering, stretching for miles, sometimes tens of miles, from distant springs or rivers, all the way into the heart of the city. You've probably seen images of their majestic arch structures striding across the countryside. These were built with incredible precision, relying primarily on gravity to maintain a gentle, consistent slope, sometimes tunneling through hills or bridging valleys to bring fresh water to the urban populace. It was a massive public investment, often funded by the emperor himself, a clear demonstration of civic pride and the state's concern for the well-being and cleanliness of its citizens. Imagine your water bill if you had a Roman aqueduct supplying your private megabath. Good thing the emperor usually picked up the tab for these public projects, or to be cold dips only for everyone. Once the aqueduct reached the city, the water would be directed into enormous cisterns or reservoirs, often located at high points from which it was then distributed through an intricate network of lead pipes, fistulae, to various public facilities, including your local thermi. Inside the bath complex itself, these pipes would feed the pools, fountains, and taps, ensuring a constant flow of fresh water. Any overflow or wastewater, meanwhile, was channeled away through equally sophisticated drainage systems, often emptying into the city's main sewers, like the famous Cloaca Maxima in Rome. Now, for the really clever bit, the heating. How did you get that deliciously warm tepidarium? or the intensely steamy caldarium? The answer lies in a system known as the hypocaust, a marvel of Roman ingenuity. The hypocaust heating system, though perhaps with some Greek precedents, was truly perfected and widely implemented by the Romans, becoming a defining feature of their baths and even some luxurious private villas. It was essentially an ancient form of central underfloor heating, but on a truly grand scale, somewhere out of sight, probably in a service area of the baths. Slaves would be toiling away, feeding massive furnaces or perfernia with wood and lots of it. These furnaces, burning day and night, generated immense heat. But instead of this heat going straight up a chimney, the hot air and smoke were ingeniously channeled beneath the floors of the rooms to be heated. The main floor of these rooms, the suspensura, was raised off the ground, supported by numerous short pillars, usually made of brick or stone, called pilae. This created a hollow space, a sort of shallow basement, through which the scorching air from the furnace could circulate freely. As this superheated air flowed under the suspensura, it would heat the tiles or marble slabs of the floor above to a toasty and sometimes incredibly hot temperature. But it didn't stop there. To heat the walls as well, and to create that wonderful steamy atmosphere in rooms like the caldarium, the Romans used special hollow tiles called tubuli. These were rectangular box tiles built into the walls, creating vertical flues. The hot air from beneath the floor would then be drawn up through these tubuli, heating the walls from the inside before finally escaping through vents in the roof. This meant you were surrounded by radiant heat, from the floor beneath your feet and from the walls around you. The hypocaust system was basically ancient Rome's underfloor heating, but on steroids, and probably with a much higher risk of the guys stoking the furnace accidentally misplacing their togas in a rather fiery fashion. The effectiveness of this system was remarkable. It could heat large rooms and sizable pools of water to very specific temperatures. Of course, it was incredibly labor-intensive and consumed vast quantities of fuel, mostly wood, which had to be constantly supplied, chopped, and fed into the furnaces by teams of slaves. The logistics of keeping a large public thermae running smoothly were formidable. Sometimes, the air from the hypocaust could be so intensely hot that, as a quirky but practical detail, bathers in the caldarium might need to wear special wooden-soled sandals, called soliaia, to protect their feet from the scorching floor. These were the original Crocs, but less colorful and more about preventing third-degree burns than making a fashion statement. Beyond the heating and water supply, the architectural design of the baths themselves was an engineering feat. Romans were masters of concrete, opus caementicium, which allowed them to create vast, unsupported vaulted ceilings and domes, giving the bath halls their characteristic spacious and airy feel. Large windows, often made of rudimentary glass or selenite, a translucent stone, were strategically placed, frequently facing south to maximize solar gain, helping to heat the rooms naturally and reduce the fuel burden on the hypocaust. Engineers and archaeologists continue to debate the exact efficiency levels of different hypocaust designs and the precise temperatures that could be consistently maintained in the hottest rooms. Like the caldarium, given the variables of fuel type, the intensity of furnace stoking, and inevitable heat loss through the structure. But there's no denying the system's fundamental brilliance. As you prepare to move from the changing room further into the bathing complex, take a moment to appreciate the hidden world of engineering beneath your feet and within the walls. The unseen aqueducts, the roaring furnaces, the intricate network of pipes and flues, all working in concert to provide you with this uniquely Roman experience of warmth, water, and social connection. It's a testament to a civilization that truly understood how to blend sophisticated technology with public leisure on an unprecedented scale. Now that you have a healthy respect for the sheer engineering power of the aqueducts and that ingenious hypocaust system keeping the floors from freezing your Roman toes off as we marveled at in Section 2, it's time to actually experience the bathing ritual itself. You've shed your clothes in the bustling apoditerium, entrusted your tunic to a hopefully honest slave or the gods of vengeance via a curse tablet, and you're ready to navigate the sequence of heated rooms that forms the core of this daily Roman institution. There wasn't one single rigidly prescribed order, but a common progression was from warm to hot And finally, to cold, designed to open the pores, cleanse the body, and then refreshingly close those pores again. Some of you, particularly the more athletic types, might have started your bath routine even before the Apoditirium, out in the Palaestra. This was the open-air exercise yard, often attached to or part of the Thermae complex, where you could engage in various physical activities. Remember those thuds and shouts we heard from the changing room that was coming from here? You might have a game of Trigon, a fast-paced ball game with 3 players, some light wrestling, practice with weights, or even just some vigorous running or jumping to work up a good sweat before you even hit the heated rooms. It was all about preparing the body, getting the circulation going. But let's assume you've either done your exercise or decided to skip straight to the thermal part. Your first port of call within the heated suite would typically be the tepidarium or warm room. As you pass through a doorway, often a grand, arched opening, you feel a distinct change in atmosphere. The air here is pleasantly warm, a gentle, caressing heat that allows your body to acclimatize before you venture into the more intense temperatures that await. The tepidarium often served as a social hub in itself, a place where you could linger, sit on marble benches that lined the walls, and continue those conversations you started in the changing room. The tepidarium was like the antechamber to a much more serious sauna, or the waiting room of heat. A good place to build up courage before facing the full furnace-like blast of the caldarium, and to catch up on who was being scandalously divorced or which gladiator was favored in the upcoming games. Some tepidaria might have a moderately warm pool, but its primary function was preparation and relaxation. From the gentle embrace of the tepidarium, you proceed to the caldarium, the hot room, and here the temperature and the humidity ramps up considerably. This room is directly above or very close to the hypocaust furnaces, and you can feel that intense, radiant heat coming from the floor. You might be glad of those wooden-soled solei we mentioned earlier. If the floor is particularly scorching and the walls, thanks to those clever tubuli, the air is thick with steam, often from a large basin of hot water. The labrum, or from one or more rectangular hot plunge baths. The alveoli built into the room. Here, you'd really start to sweat, the heat opening your pores and drawing out impurities. Or so the theory went. Now comes a crucial part of the Roman cleaning process. As soap in its modern form wasn't commonly used for personal bathing by the Romans, a mainstream historical fact is that while they knew of soap, it was more associated with the Gauls and Germans, or used for laundry. Cleaning involved a different method. You, or if you were wealthy, your slave, would rub olive oil all over your body. This wasn't fancy. Perfumed oil for moisturizing afterwards that came later. This was basic olive oil meant to loosen the dirt and dead skin. Once thoroughly oiled up, you'd take a strigil. This was a curved metal scraper, usually made of bronze or iron, with a handle at one end. You'd then systematically scrape the oil, sweat, and accumulated grime from your skin. The strigil was the Roman loofah, but made of metal and way more intense. Think of it as an exfoliating squeegee for your entire body. The amount of gunk that came off, a mixture known as glow, could probably build a small, slightly greasy sculpture. This process could be quite vigorous, and if you were having it done by a slave, you'd instruct them on the desired pressure. Bizarrely, this glue wasn't always just discarded. A quirky and slightly stomach-turning tidbit is that the glow scraped from famous athletes or gladiators was sometimes collected and sold. Some people believed it possessed medicinal or restorative properties and would buy it to rub on their own bodies, hoping to absorb some of that champion vitality. One shudders to think of the hygiene implications. Some larger bath complexes might also feature a sudatorium, a dedicated sweating room, often circular and domed, which was even hotter than the caldarium but typically with a drier heat, much like a modern sauna. If you really wanted to purge your system through perspiration, this was the place to go. It was usually smaller and more intense. After you've sweated oiled and scraped yourself to a state of what the Romans considered cleanliness in the caldarium, and perhaps the sudatorium, it was time for a dramatic change of pace and temperature. You'd make your way to the frigidarium, the cold room. This was often one of the largest and most architecturally impressive rooms in the Thermae, containing one or more large, unheated pools of bracingly cold water. The plunge into this cold water was an essential part of the ritual. It was meant to be invigorating, to close the pores that had been opened by the heat, and to refresh the body and mind. That plunge into the Frigidarium pool. It was the ancient Roman version of an ice bucket challenge, but mandatory and probably accompanied by less social media boasting and more involuntary gasping and shivering. But the feeling afterwards, many attested, was one of immense refreshment and vitality. If the thermae was grand enough, it might also boast a natatio, a large open-air swimming pool, usually unheated. After the intensity of the hot rooms and the shock of the cold plunge, a leisurely swim in the natatio under the Roman sky would be a pleasant way to cool down further and enjoy some more relaxed socializing before heading back to the apodyterium to dress. Of course, not everyone followed this exact hot-to-cold sequence religiously, nor did everyone visit every single room or spend the same amount of time in each. It was a flexible ritual, adaptable to personal preference, the time you had available, and perhaps even your doctor's advice. Classicists and archaeologists still debate the exact therapeutic or physiological understanding Romans had for this specific hot-to-cold bathing sequence, whether it was based purely on empirical observation of what felt good and seemed to work, or if it was more deeply tied to the prevailing humoral theories of health, which emphasized balance within the body's fluids. Whatever the precise theory, the experience itself, the journey through varying temperatures, the cleansing rituals, and the constant social interaction left you feeling renewed, refreshed, and very much a part of Roman society. So, you've braved the invigorating shock of the Frigidarium. Remember that gasp-inducing plunge we just took? And perhaps enjoyed a leisurely float in the vast natatio under the gaze of marble statues. Your skin is tingling from the strigil scrape and the alternating temperatures. You feel remarkably clean by Roman standards. Anyway, after all that olive oil business we discussed, and now what with your body refreshed, your mind turns to the other great purpose of being here, the unparalleled, unmissable social scene. Remember the apodyterium where you first disrobed amidst a buzz of chatter? That was just the warm-up act for the main social event that permeates every corner of these magnificent thermae. This is where the Roman baths truly earned their reputation as the ancient world's social media platform. Think of the baths as a quintessential third place, not your home, not your workplace, but a vital public space where informal social life unfolded in all its messy, vibrant glory. After the physical rituals of cleansing and exercise, you're now primed for hours of interaction. And the prime currency here, much like on your favorite digital feeds today, is information news, gossip, and personal updates. In a world without newspapers as we know them, or instant global communication, news traveled orally, and the baths were a critical node in this information network. Here, amidst the steam and the echoing chatter, you'd catch up on everything. The Roman baths were basically the ancient world's liveliest internet forum, but in real time, in person, and with significantly more dampness. Did you hear what Senator Gracchus grumbled about the new tax on figs outrageous? Oh, and pass the perfumed oil. Would you? What kind of gossip are we talking about? Absolutely everything. Political rumors would fly who was rising in the emperor's favor. Which magistrate was suspected of corruption? What was the latest news from the legions on the frontier? Social scandals were dissected with relish illicit affairs, extravagant spending, who made a fool of themselves at last night's dinner party. Business dealings were discussed. A merchant might share news of a successful shipment, or another might lament a loss at sea. You'd hear personal news too? Births, deaths, marriages, illnesses. It all swirled through the warm, humid air, passed from one group to another, evolving with each retelling. Slaves, while discreetly attending their masters, were also key conduits of information, picking up tidbits and spreading them through their own networks later on. Beyond just catching up on the latest happenings, the baths were a prime location for networking and making connections. This was where you could accidentally bump into influential people. Perhaps a wealthy patron whose favor you were seeking, or a senior official from whom you needed a permit. Trying to secure a loan. Looking for a letter of introduction to someone important. Hoping to find a suitable tutor for your son. A casual encounter in the tepidarium or while relaxing on a bench after your plunge could be far more effective than a formal appointment. Oh, fancy meeting you here. Lucius, you're looking remarkably well. Say, about that shipment of wine from Gaul I was hoping to discuss. It's a bit like LinkedIn, but you're both probably wearing very little, which certainly breaks down a few barriers. Or Rex entirely new. Awkward ones? Young men, in particular, might use the baths to find mentors or to impress potential employers with their wit and physique. Indeed, maintaining your social standing was an integral part of the bathhouse experience. You wanted to be seen at the fashionable thermi, ideally at the popular times, mingling with the right sort of people. If you had a well-toned physique from your exercises in the palestra, this was the place to modestly, of course, display it. Arriving with an impressive entourage of well-groomed slaves also sent a clear signal about your wealth and status. Your conversational skills, your knowledge of current affairs, your ability to deliver a witty remark, all were part of the subtle public performance of your social identity. Patronage, which was an absolute cornerstone of Roman society, found a natural and informal setting here. Wealthy patrons would often meet their clients at the baths, reinforcing those hierarchical social relationships outside the more formal morning salutatio or greeting ritual at their homes. This mainstream historical fact highlights how the baths were woven into the very fabric of Roman power structures and social mobility. The baths weren't just for idle chatter or social climbing, though. They also served as informal salons for intellectual discussion and artistic expression. Philosophers might gather a group of disciples for a debate in a quieter alcove. Poets or rhetoricians, eager for an audience, would sometimes take the opportunity to recite their latest works. The Roman writer Seneca, who famously lived above a bathhouse, complained bitterly about the noise, and among the sounds that drove him to distraction were the enthusiastic and often, in his opinion, untalented poets declaiming their verses. You might be trying to relax after your strigiling, and suddenly some aspiring wordsmith launches into his 20-stanza epic on the mating habits of snails. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. You just have to nod politely, look thoughtful, and hope he finishes before your skin gets too pruny. To ensure a good reception, a particularly quirky, though perhaps not entirely common, practice might involve a wealthy individual hiring professional applauders, or laudicini, to strategically cheer during their protege's recitation. Talk about manufacturing your own likes. Of course, more mundane social arrangements were also made. You'd invite friends to dinner parties, make plans for the theater, or arrange to meet at the chariot races. The relaxed, leisurely atmosphere, where people had shed not only their clothes but also some of their daily cares, made it an ideal environment for fostering connections. Sociolinguists and historians continue to debate the extent to which this informal, multi-class at least to some degree environment of the baths influenced the development of Roman slang and colloquial speech patterns, potentially acting as a linguistic melting pot where different ways of speaking rubbed off on each other. So, as you dry yourself off with a linen towel, perhaps applying some fragrant oils to your skin, you are at the very heart of Rome's daily information superhighway. It's a place of immense social energy, where news is made and disseminated. Reputations are built or questioned, deals are struck, ideas are exchanged, and the complex web of Roman society is constantly being rewoven. It is, in essence, the living, breathing, and very steamy embodiment of a community connecting with itself. Now, after all that intense networking and gossip-mongering we just dived into in the steamy halls, a session that probably left your brain feeling as pleasantly warmed as the tepidarium itself, you might feel the need for something a bit more physical, before you even thought about oiling up and scraping down with a strigil, or perhaps as an energetic interlude in your bathing ritual. Many a Roman would head for the palestra. Remember those thuds and shouts we heard echoing into the apoditerium when you first arrived? That energetic racket was emanating from this very space, the bath's dedicated zone for getting your Roman sweat on, a place where grunts and cheers mingled with the ever-present social hum. You step out from the covered porticos of the main bath building, or perhaps you enter the palestra directly after changing, and find yourself in a large open-air courtyard. The ground underfoot is likely packed earth or sand, ideal for exercise. Surrounding this central space, then you'll often see a colonnade, offering shade for spectators or those taking a break between bouts of activity. This is the palaestra, a concept the Romans enthusiastically borrowed from the Greeks, for whom the palaestra was originally a wrestling school. In the context of the Roman thermae, it evolved into a more general-purpose exercise area, a sort of ancient outdoor gym and playing field, buzzing with activity and, of course, more opportunities for social interaction. What kind of activities would you see, or perhaps join in with wrestling or luctatio, remained incredibly popular? You'd see pairs of men, their bodies often gleaming with oil not just for cleaning later, but also to make them harder to grip, an ancient sporting hack, grappling under the sun. They'd strain and heave, attempting to throw each other to the ground according to various rules. It was probably less about a championship belt and more about friendly competition, demonstrating strength and skill, and perhaps who had to buy the post-exercise wine, or in this case, the first round of refreshing drinks from a nearby vendor. If wrestling isn't your speed, perhaps a bit of weightlifting. Romans used halteres, which were essentially dumbbells made of stone or metal. You'd see men performing various lifts and swings, building their muscles and, no doubt, enjoying the admiring glances of onlookers. The palaestra was the perfect place to subtly or not so subtly flex those biceps you'd been working on. Nothing quite says I'm a man of substance and discipline, like casually hoisting a hefty stone dumbbell while appearing to be deep in a philosophical discussion. Ball games were another massive draw. You might encounter a game of Trigon, a fast-paced and skillful affair involving 3 players arranged in a triangle. They'd throw 2 or more small, hard balls at each other simultaneously, catching and throwing with either hand. It required quick reflexes, good hand-eye coordination, and a certain tolerance for the occasional misthrown ball thwacking you unexpectedly. Then there was Harpastum, a much more vigorous team game, often likened to an ancient form of rugby or American football. It involved 2 teams trying to seize and keep a small, hard ball on their side of a marked field, with running, dodging, and what sounds like a fair bit of physical contact. Harpastum sounds a bit like ancient Roman rugby, likely with fewer clearly defined rules and a considerably higher chance of acquiring a glorious bruise or two. He's going for the line. Oh, wait. He just got robustly intercepted by a vacationing legionary with a point to prove. For those preferring something a little less intense, there was Phallus, which involved a larger, air-filled ball made of leather, more like a bladder. This could be a gentler game of catch, or perhaps something akin to a rudimentary form of volleyball, with players trying to keep the ball aloft. You'd also see individuals engaged in running or various athletic jumps. Some might even practice mock fencing or weapons training, using wooden swords, roods, or staves. This wasn't about preparing for actual combat in the arena, but more for physical fitness, coordination, and maintaining a degree of martial skill, which was still admired in Roman society. The social aspect here was just as important as in the heated rooms. Spectators would gather under the colonnades, cheering on their friends, commenting on the games, placing small bets, and generally adding to the lively atmosphere. Teams would form, fostering camaraderie and friendly rivalries. It was another venue for display of your strength, your agility, your sportsmanship. Trainers or instructors, known as ellipti or pedagogi, though the latter more often for boys, might be on hand to offer advice, supervise exercises, or even give massages. Roman culture, deeply influenced by Greek ideals, placed a high value on physical fitness, mens sana in corpore sano, a sound mind in a sound body, as the poet Juvenal would later phrase it, is a mainstream historical fact reflecting this sentiment. The palaestra provided the perfect public stage for this ideal. While men of all ages, though perhaps less so, the very elderly, unless they were just spectating and offering unsolicited advice, would participate. The palaestra was predominantly a male domain in most public thermae. Women, if they exercised, usually did so in separate, smaller facilities if available, or engaged in more private forms of physical activity. A quirky or fringe tidbit you might witness could be a particularly enthusiastic individual, keen to draw attention, engaging in elaborate shadow boxing against an imaginary opponent, complete with dramatic grunts and flourishes, or performing complex gymnastic routines that were as much about showmanship as fitness. It's the ancient equivalent of someone in a modern gym taking a series of very loud selfies between sets. There were even professional or semi-professional ball game players who might be minor celebrities, their skills admired and emulated. Historians and archaeologists continue to debate the extent to which formal athletic training for competitive purposes versus casual recreation and general fitness dominated palestra activities in most public thermae across the empire. Was it more like a serious training ground, or more like a lively public park with an emphasis on games? The reality probably varied depending on the size of the bath, its location, and the specific clientele. However, there's no doubt that this open-air exercise space was an integral part of the complete Roman bathing experience, a place to energize the body before or after soothing it in the warmth of the baths, ensuring that you left the thermae not just clean and socially updated, but physically invigorated too. After all that wrestling and ball throwing in the palestra we just imagined, a session that likely left you feeling both invigorated and perhaps a little dusty, or even just from the sheer exertion of socializing like a Roman pro in the steamy halls as we explored in Section 4, you're probably feeling a bit peckish and almost certainly thirsty. Fortunately, the Roman bath complex is more than ready for you. Because it's not just a spa and a gym, it's also a veritable ancient food court, a pop-up market, and a purveyor of various personal services, all conveniently located under one very large, often beautifully decorated roof. As you wander from the exercise yard or emerge from the bathing circuit itself, feeling remarkably clean and perhaps a little lightheaded from the heat, your senses are immediately assailed by a fresh wave of stimuli. Remember the philosopher Seneca complaining about the sheer noise from his apartment situated above a bathhouse? Well, a good portion of that delightful racket he so vividly described was likely the enthusiastic cries of the vendors. You'd hear the sausage seller, the botularius, hawking his wares with a distinctive booming call. The pastry vendor, the placentarius, would be extolling the virtues of his honey cakes and cheese tarts. Fruit sellers would be calling out the ripeness of their figs and grapes. It's a lively, bustling atmosphere of commerce, an integral part of the bathhouse experience. So, what culinary delights could you expect to find? Don't imagine a three-course meal, but rather an array of convenient, portable snacks perfect for a post-exercise pick-me-up or a light refreshment between soaks. You could get a Roman sausage, perhaps a type of blood sausage or a simple pork link, probably sold hot and ready to eat. Hard-boiled eggs were a common protein-rich snack. Various types of bread, flatbreads, and savory biscuits would be on offer. Sweet pastries like libum, a small cheesecake, or placenta, a layered pastry with cheese and honey, not the afterbirth. Thankfully, I would tempt those with a sweeter tooth. Fresh fruits like figs, grapes, apples, and pears, along with various nuts, provided healthier options. You could probably get a Roman sausage on a stick, some juicy figs, maybe a pastry that looked suspiciously like a modern, very rustic fruitcake. It was fast food, ancient style, likely best eaten with a certain robust Roman constitution, and perhaps without looking too closely at the hand-washing facilities of the stall. These vendors might have fixed stalls in designated areas, perhaps around the palaestra or in an outer courtyard, or they might be more mobile, roaming through the less formal parts of the complex with their trays of goodies. Some larger thermae even had dedicated snack bars or papanae attached. And to drink wine, of course, was a staple. It would typically be served diluted with water, as was the Roman custom, with varying qualities and prices available. If you were feeling less extravagant, or perhaps if you were a soldier or from the lower classes, you might opt for pasca, a refreshing, if somewhat acidic, drink made from vinegar mixed with water, while the baths themselves provided an abundance of water for washing. Clean, cool drinking water might also be sold by vendors, as well as sweetened fruit juices or other concoctions. But the entrepreneurial spirit within the baths extended far beyond just food and drink. This was also the place to get yourself pampered, preened, and generally serviced. After your exertions and your bath, you might fancy a massage. Professional masseurs, often called aliptai, the same term sometimes used for trainers who oiled athletes, would offer their services, kneading tired muscles and applying fragrant oils to leave your skin smooth and scented. Then there was the very Roman concern with body hair, or rather, the lack of it. Depilation services were a booming trade within the bathhouse. You'd have specialists, sometimes called dropatistai, ready to remove unwanted hair from practically any part of your body. Their tools of the trade included tweezers, volseli for plucking, or various depilatory creams and pastes, some of which were likely rather harsh and smelly, made from ingredients like resin, pitch, or even caustic substances. You might hear the occasional sharp yelp or hiss from a quiet corner of the baths, a sure sign someone was undergoing this often painful process in the pursuit of perfectly smooth skin. Beauty is pain, even when you're draped in a toga for most of the day. Other personal grooming services were also available. You could get your nails trimmed and tidied. Barbers might set up shop, offering shaves and haircuts. Perfumers would be on hand with an array of exotic scents, ready to anoint you with the latest fashionable fragrance once you were clean and dry. You could basically get a full spa day, a vigorous workout, a business lunch, and catch up on all the political intrigue and social scandals, all without ever leaving the sprawling bath complex. It was the ultimate one-stop shop for the well-rounded Roman citizen. Some establishments might even offer towel rental or laundry services, though many Romans, particularly the wealthier ones, would bring their own linens and slaves to carry them. You could probably even get your strigil sharpened if it had become dull from scraping off too much glue. The mainstream historical fact is that many of these Roman public baths, especially the Grand Imperial Thermae, were conceived as far more than just places to wash. They were comprehensive leisure centers, often incorporating not only the bathing blocks and palaestra, but also libraries, lecture halls for philosophers and poets, art galleries displaying statues and mosaics, and beautifully landscaped gardens for strolling and relaxing. This made them true multi-purpose public amenities, central to the cultural and social life of the city. A particularly quirky and often commented upon feature of bathhouse commerce was the sheer noise generated by some of these vendors. We've mentioned Seneca's complaints. He specifically singles out the sausage seller, the confectioner, and, rather vividly, the depilator, continually uttering his shrill and penetrating cry in order to draw attention, and never silent except when he is plucking armpits and making his victim yell instead. One can only imagine the unique soundscape this created, a symphony of splashing, shouting, selling, and the occasional shriek of beautification. Archaeologists and economic historians continue to debate the precise formal economic structures within these bustling bath complexes, for instance, how concessions or licenses were granted to these myriad vendors, and the extent to which the official bath administration directly profited from these ancillary services, versus simply permitting or facilitating them as an expected convenience for their patrons. Regardless of the specific arrangements, it's clear that the baths fostered a vibrant microeconomy, a hive of small-scale entrepreneurs catering to the diverse needs and desires of the bathing public. From a simple snack to a full grooming session, the Roman bath complex aimed to look after your body, inside and out, ensuring you left not just cleaner but also well-fed, well-oiled, and perhaps even a little bit smoother than when you arrived. So, after you've enjoyed your savory sausage or sweet honey cake from the bathhouse vendors, and perhaps bravely endured a session with the dropacista for that fashionably smooth, hairless look we just discussed, ouch, indeed, you might pause on a warm marble bench and wonder what was all this really for, beyond the obvious pleasure of a hot soak, the invigorating chill of a cold plunge, and, of course, the non-stop social whirl. What did this elaborate ritual of cleanliness, this pursuit of health, and this admiration for the body beautiful actually mean to your average Roman citizen? It turns out, it meant a great deal, intertwining ideas of personal well-being, civic virtue, and what it meant to be truly Roman. At the heart of it was the Roman concept of salus, a word that translates not just as health, but encompasses a broader sense of well-being, safety, and prosperity. Achieving and maintaining salus was a core aspiration, and regular bathing was considered absolutely central to this. Cleanliness wasn't merely a personal preference, it was a mark of civilization, a daily practice that distinguished the Roman from the so-called barbarian peoples on the fringes of the empire, who were often stereotyped fairly or unfairly as being rather less fragrant. If you didn't bathe regularly in Rome, you weren't just a bit whiffy by our standards, you were potentially signaling a lack of civic pride and a disregard for Roman custom. What's that, Titus? You skipped your bath today to finish polishing your shield collection. Highly irregular. One might think you've been spending too much time with the Gauls. Remember that strigil and olive oil routine we detailed earlier? The scraping off of the glow for the Romans. This wasn't just about removing visible dirt. They believed this process opened the pores, invigorated the skin, and removed unhealthy residues that could lead to illness. While their understanding of germ theory was, by modern standards, non-existent, they empirically understood that this scraping and rubbing action, combined with the temperature changes, left them feeling cleaner and healthier. After the strigiling, applying perfumed oils was not just about smelling pleasant. It was also thought to condition the skin and maintain its suppleness. The specific sequence of hot and cold rooms in the bathing ritual was also believed to have significant health benefits. The intense heat of the caldarium or sudatorium induced copious sweating, which was thought to expel toxins and impurities from the body. This was often linked to the ancient medical theory of humors, the idea that health depended on a balance of four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Sweating, along with other bodily evacuations, was seen as a way to rid the body of excess or corrupted humors. The subsequent plunge into the frigidarium's cold pool was believed to tone the body, close the pores, thus preventing chills or the re-entry of bad influences, and stimulate circulation. Roman medical writers, such as the renowned Aulus Cornelius Celsus in the 1st century AD and later Galen in the 2nd century AD, frequently prescribed specific bathing regimens, detailing the temperature of the water, the duration of the soak, and even the type of bath establishment as part of treatments for a wide range of illnesses. This mainstream historical fact shows that balneotherapy or therapeutic bathing was deeply integrated into formal Roman medicine, not just a folk practice. Their medical theories were often a delightful, if sometimes perplexing, mix of keen observation and, well, let's just say it's the humors acting up again. Feeling sluggish and congested. A good hot bath to sweat out those bad humors. Too agitated and feverish. A careful cold plunge to calm those rascally humors down. Then there was the Roman ideal of the body beautiful, heavily influenced by classical Greek aesthetics. There was a profound appreciation for a fit, toned, and well-proportioned physique, especially in men. The palestra, with its opportunities for wrestling, weightlifting, and various ball games as we explored in Section 5, was the perfect place to cultivate and display this physical ideal. The Roman gym enthusiast in the palestra wasn't just lifting those stone halters for recreation. He was actively sculpting his body to meet a recognized standard of male beauty and vitality. And, naturally, a well-maintained physique was something to be admired within the baths themselves. Smooth, hairless skin was also highly valued for both men and women, hence the popularity of those enthusiastic depilators. Nudity, or near nudity, within the baths was generally a matter-of-fact affair, part of the shared communal experience, though social status and decorum still subtly influenced interactions. Now, from our modern vantage point, armed with knowledge of microbiology, it's easy to see potential hygiene downsides to the Roman bathing experience. While the constant flow of water in many baths helped, the water in the pools wasn't always changed with the frequency we'd expect today, nor was it typically chlorinated. This could lead to the transmission of bacteria and other pathogens. Sharing strigils, if you didn't bring your own, or using communal oil, could also spread skin infections. The warm, moist environment was an ideal breeding ground for fungi. So that little cheeky aside in the introduction about "you probably won't survive this without catching something" wasn't entirely facetious. Romans certainly suffered from various eye infections, skin ailments, and intestinal troubles, some of which might have been exacerbated by certain aspects of bath culture. A quirky, yet significant, aspect of Roman health belief tied to bathing was the reverence for specific mineral springs or thermal waters believed to possess unique healing properties, often attributed to the patronage of particular gods or local nature spirits. This led to a form of medical tourism, with people traveling considerable distances to famous spa towns like Aquae Sulis, now Bath in England. with its hot springs sacred to the goddess Sulis Minerva, or the luxurious and sometimes notorious Baiae on the Bay of Naples, renowned for its volcanic thermal vents. These sites often had elaborate bath complexes built around the sacred springs, attracting health seekers from across the empire. Ultimately, historians of medicine and hygiene continue to debate the actual net impact of Roman bathing habits on public health, whether the undeniable benefits of widespread, regular cleaning and the promotion of physical fitness significantly outweighed the inherent risks posed by potentially unsanitary shared water facilities and the complete lack of understanding of infectious disease transmission routes. What is clear, however, is that for the Romans themselves, the baths were an indispensable institution for pursuing solace. It was where they went to cleanse their bodies, soothe their ailments, invigorate their spirits, and display their civilized status, all within a grand, communal setting that celebrated both the practical and the aesthetic aspects of a healthy life, as they understood it. As you lounge in the tepidarium, feeling remarkably cleaner and more thoroughly Roman after your striduling session, and that bracing plunge into the frigidarium which we navigated in Section 3, you're not just sitting in a functional warm room. You're immersed in a carefully constructed environment designed to impress your senses, elevate your spirit, and subtly reinforce your understanding of the Roman world and your place within it. This isn't just about the practicalities of getting clean or catching up on gossip. It's about being enveloped by art, luxury, and architectural grandeur on a scale that still astounds us today. Remember the sheer ambition of the engineering we talked about with those colossal aqueducts and the ingenious hypocaust systems. That same Roman drive for magnificence and technical prowess extended to every visual and spatial detail of the Thermae. Look around you. The very architecture of these great public baths, especially the imperial thermae in Rome or major provincial capitals, speaks of power and permanence. You are in vast, echoing halls with soaring vaulted ceilings and magnificent domes, often with a central oculus open to the sky, allowing a dramatic shaft of light to pierce the steamy air. The Romans were masters of concrete, and this allowed them to create enormous interior spaces without the need for forests of columns, giving a sense of openness and grandeur. Large windows, sometimes made with panes of selenite or early forms of glass, are strategically placed, not just for illumination but to create specific moods, perhaps catching the afternoon sun to warm a particular room or highlighting a focal point like a statue or a fountain. In many of the larger thermae, you'd notice a symmetrical layout, a carefully planned progression of spaces that guides you through the bathing ritual while constantly presenting you with new and impressive vistas. And then there are the decorations. An absolute feast for your Roman eyes. The floors beneath your possibly wooden-soled feet are often a riot of color and intricate design, thanks to elaborate mosaics. These aren't just simple patterns. They are often stunning works of art depicting lively marine scenes with dolphins leaping, fish swimming, and Neptune himself perhaps brandishing his trident. You might see mythological tales unfolding in tiny stone tesserae, scenes of athletic contests from the Palaestra, or complex geometric designs that dazzle the eye. Imagine trying to absorb the day's news from your fellow bathers while simultaneously trying not to spill your cup of diluted wine on a priceless depiction of Hercules wrestling the Nemean lion. So, did you hear about Flavius? Oh, careful, that's a rather rare Thessalian green marble dolphin you nearly splashed. Marble, in fact, is everywhere. Not just plain white marble, but a dazzling array of imported colored marbles from every corner of the empire. Rich greens from Greece, golden yellows from Numidia in Africa, deep reds from Egypt, streaked purples from Phrygia in Anatolia. This lavish use of exotic stone for columns, for cladding the walls in gleaming sheets, a technique called revetment, for crafting ornate basins and fountains, was a deliberate display of Rome's wealth, its reach, and its ability to command resources from distant lands. It transformed the bathhouse into a glittering showcase of imperial power. Oh, is this Numidian yellow you're leaning against? Gaius, how delightfully common. My country villa, of course, is currently being fitted with some rather fetching Phrygian purple. Statuary also played a crucial role in the bathhouse aesthetic. Niches in the walls and pedestals in the grand halls would be filled with sculptures. You'd find copies of famous Greek masterpieces, nodding to Rome's cultural inheritance. There would be imposing statues of emperors, looking stern and godlike, or perhaps portraits of the local benefactor who funded this particular bath complex, reminding you of their generosity. Figures of gods and goddesses associated with health, water, and physical prowess, like Hygeia, goddess of health, Asclepius, god of medicine, Hercules for strength, or Venus, goddess of beauty, often presiding over rooms where women bathed or where perfumes were applied, would gaze down upon you. The opulence continued upwards. Ceilings were often adorned with intricate stucco work, decorative plaster molded into elaborate patterns, reliefs, and figurative scenes, frequently painted in vibrant colors. And the gentle sound of splashing water wouldn't just be coming from the pools, ornate fountains. Themselves works of art in bronze or marble, served as focal points in courtyards or larger halls, their constantly flowing water adding to the atmosphere of coolness and luxury, a testament to that incredible aqueduct system. This incredible investment in art and architecture wasn't just for show, or at least not only for show. The construction of these vast public thermae, like the famous baths of Caracalla or Diocletian in Rome, which could accommodate thousands of bathers at once and often included extras like libraries, lecture halls, and extensive public gardens, was a significant form of imperial expenditure and a powerful tool for currying public favor. This is a mainstream historical fact. Providing such magnificent facilities was part of the emperor's duty to care for his people, a tangible expression of Roman civilization and imperial benevolence, akin to the provision of bread and circuses. Inscriptions prominently displayed would often record the name of the emperor or the wealthy local patron who had built or renovated the baths, ensuring their generosity was not forgotten. And while the entry fee to most public baths was nominal, allowing access to all social strata, your own social standing was still subtly on display within these opulent walls. Even though everyone was largely in a state of undress, you could still gauge a person's status. It might be the number and attentiveness of the slaves accompanying them, the quality and fineness of their linen towels, their strigils perhaps silver rather than bronze, or the expensive perfumed oils they used after their bath. It was evident in their confident demeanor, their eloquent Latin, their ability to spend hours leisurely socializing, or the way others deferred to them in conversation. It was the ancient Roman version of having the latest high-tech chariot and a retinue of fawning clients. Being in such an environment was an immersive cultural experience. The mythological scenes in the mosaics and frescoes weren't just pretty pictures, they were stories that most Romans would recognize. Part of their shared cultural literacy. Sometimes, a quirky or humorous touch might be found in less formal areas. For example, mosaic floors in latrines or changing rooms might feature amusing scenes. Lucky symbols like an outsized phallus for good fortune, or even an evil eye, apotropaic symbols intended to ward off bad luck or malevolent spirits. You might even spot some hastily scratched graffiti on a less polished wall, a fleeting personal comment from a long-forgotten bather. Art historians and archaeologists continue to debate the specific iconographic programs in bathhouse decorations. That is, the deeper meaning and intention behind the choice of particular mythological scenes. The arrangement of statues, or the symbolism of the mosaic patterns. Was it all purely for aesthetic delight? Was there an intention to be morally edifying, reminding bathers of Roman virtues or divine power? Or did these artistic choices subtly reinforce Roman imperial ideologies, celebrating military victories, the prosperity of the empire, and the divinely ordained social order? The answer is likely a complex mix of all these things. But for you, the Roman bather, stepping into the thermae was like entering a living museum, a public palace, and a vibrant community center all rolled into one. A daily reminder of the grandeur and complexity of Roman civilization. So, you're surrounded by those stunning mosaics depicting heroic myths and playful dolphins, lounging on a marble bench that still radiates a gentle warmth from the Hippocaust, as we just admired in the previous section. You feel like you're in a public palace, a temple dedicated to leisure and cleanliness, rather than just a place to wash away the day's grime. But don't let all that artistic splendor and the relaxed, steamy atmosphere fool you entirely. Beneath the surface of leisurely chatter, casual gossip, and aesthetic appreciation, the Roman baths were a surprisingly potent hub for getting actual, serious business done, and for the subtle, sometimes slippery, dance of Roman politics. This was where connections were not just made, but actively leveraged. While the Forum was the place for formal speeches and grand public announcements, and the Senate House for official deliberations, the Thermae offered a unique, informal arena for the movers and shakers of Roman society. Here, stripped of the usual trappings of office or formal attire, important discussions could take place, deals could be initiated, and political wins could be tested in a way that simply wasn't possible in more structured settings. You might be mid-strigil, covered in olive oil and what the Romans considered honest dirt, when the fellow bather next to you, equally unadorned, casually remarks, "Quintus, my dear fellow, about those 50 amphorae of premium Spanish garum you owe me from last season's shipment. Business, it seems, never truly sleeps, not even when it's naked, sweating, and surrounded by the echoes of 100 other conversations. Merchants would gather, perhaps in a slightly quieter alcove of the tepidarium, or while relaxing after their exercises in the palaestra, to discuss market prices, the availability of goods, the reliability of shipping routes, or potential partnerships for new ventures. Craftsmen might discreetly solicit commissions from wealthy patrons they encountered. Financiers could sound out opportunities for loans or investments. The very informality of the setting could be an advantage in negotiations. The shared experience of bathing, the relaxed posture, the general atmosphere of leisure, and it could all serve to disarm, to make discussions less confrontational, more congenial. A preliminary agreement reached amidst the steam and camaraderie of the baths might then be formalized later, perhaps sealed with a handshake and an invitation to a proper dinner party. Political maneuvering was just as prevalent, if often more subtle. Senators and magistrates would use the baths to discreetly sound out opinions on upcoming legislation, to gauge support for a particular policy, or to quietly build alliances. You might see a group of influential figures huddled together in a warm pool, their voices low, discussing strategies or sharing confidential information. Candidates for public office would certainly not miss the opportunity to make themselves visible, to greet potential voters, and to engage in conversation with prominent citizens whose endorsement could be valuable. An aspiring politician might casually find himself in the hottest part of the Caldarium with a group of influential guild members, eloquently outlining his brilliant new plan for improving the city's grain supply, all while trying not to visibly wilt from the intense heat. Talk about a trial by fire, or rather by steam and sweat. The baths were also a hothouse for political rumor and targeted disinformation. A carefully planted comment about a rival's alleged incompetence or moral failing, dropped into the right ears in the chatty atmosphere of the baths, could spread through the city like wildfire, significantly more effectively, perhaps, than a formal denunciation in the Senate. And you can be sure that in times of political tension, agents of the emperor or spies working for various factions would be present, their ears open, trying to pick up any whispers of dissent or conspiracy, trying to have a genuinely top-secret political discussion in a crowded, echoing bathhouse. Good luck with that. It was decidedly less cone of silence and much more hope that chap enthusiastically splashing over there isn't on your rival's payroll. The unique environment, the general state of nudity or semi-nudity, the informality, the mix of social classes, however nuanced that mixing was, must have had a curious effect on these serious dealings. Did it truly level the playing field, allowing for more candid exchanges? Or were the underlying status cues, the quality of one's slaves, the eloquence of one's speech, the deference shown by others as we touched on in the previous section, still powerfully in play, likely a bit of both? The baths provided a space where traditional hierarchies might be temporarily softened, but rarely entirely dissolved. The patron-client relationship, so fundamental to Roman society, was actively nurtured here. Clients would seek out their patrons to ask for favors, legal assistance, financial support, or recommendation for a position. Patrons, in turn, would use these interactions to dispense advice, offer help, and thereby solidify the loyalty of their followers and maintain their own influence. The baths were an essential, everyday venue for these ongoing negotiations of power and obligation. A mainstream historical fact is that many important Roman political figures, including several emperors like Hadrian, made a point of frequenting the public baths and interacting, sometimes quite informally, with ordinary citizens. This was not just for leisure, it was a canny political move, a way to gauge public sentiment, to appear accessible and benevolent, and to reinforce their connection with the populace, a carefully managed form of imperial public relations. Given the public nature of the baths, absolute privacy for sensitive discussions was always a concern. While there might be quieter niches, private rooms in some establishments, though these were less common in the grand public thermi, or specific times of day when the crowds thinned, the risk of being overheard was ever present. This might have led to some rather quirky or fringe adaptations, such as the use of subtle gestures, coded language, or intermediaries for particularly confidential political or business arrangements. One can almost imagine the existence of a bathhouse broker, a shadowy figure who specialized in making discreet introductions or facilitating delicate negotiations within the unique environment of the Thermi, knowing just who to approach and when. Historians of Roman politics continue to debate the actual weight and influence of these informal discussions within the Thermi on major state decisions or significant economic ventures, versus the more formal deliberations that took place in the Senate, the law courts, or imperial councils. How much of what happened in the baths was real, politicking or binding business, and how much was simply performative engagement, social lubrication, or the sounding out of possibilities? It's a complex question, but there's little doubt that the Roman baths were far more than just a place to get clean. They were a surprisingly dynamic and often crucial arena where the threads of commerce were woven. Political careers were advanced or subtly undermined, and the intricate power plays of Roman society unfolded daily amidst the steam, the chatter, and the scent of perfumed oils. Now, after delving into the impressive art, the grand architecture, and even the surprisingly high-stakes business deals and political maneuvering that took place within those steamy marble-clad walls, as we explored in the last couple of sections, you might be forming an image of the Roman baths as entirely wholesome, dignified establishments, paragons of civic virtue, cleanliness, and healthy recreation. Well, hold on to your strigil and perhaps clutch your metaphorical pearls. Because like any popular social hub, where large numbers of people gather in various states of undress, with ample leisure time on their hands, there was inevitably a less salubrious, and certainly more criticized, side to the story. Not every activity was about athletic prowess or philosophical debate. While most Romans undoubtedly used the baths for their intended purposes, getting clean, socializing, exercising, and relaxing, the very nature of these places made them susceptible to behaviors that raised the eyebrows, and sometimes the ire, of Roman moralists. The public mingling, the informality, the nudity or semi-nudity, and the general atmosphere of leisure could, in some instances, spill over into activities that were considered less than respectable. Remember all those vendors hawking food and wine we talked about? Well, where there's wine, there's sometimes drunkenness, and with drunkenness can come rowdiness, loud arguments, or behavior that disturbed patrons seeking a more tranquil experience. Some bathers might engage in a bit of gambling, dice games or other games of chance, in a quiet corner or in an adjoining tavern that was part of the bath complex, hoping to win a few denarii while they relaxed. And of course, the old problem of theft in the Apoditerium persisted, a constant reminder that not everyone present was a model of Roman virtue. But the most frequent and vociferous accusations leveled against the baths, particularly by satirical poets and stern moral philosophers, revolved around sexual impropriety, the combination of exposed flesh, a relaxed atmosphere, and the easy mingling of people was seen by some as a recipe for licentiousness. Assignations could be arranged, flirtations could blossom amidst the steam, and undoubtedly, some individuals used the baths as a place to meet potential lovers or even to engage the services of prostitutes, who might operate within or near the bath complexes. Roman moralists loved to complain about the perceived decline in standards. The youth of today, they'd lament, spending all their time getting oiled, gossiping, and engaging in who knows what, instead of being as stoically boring as we are. A particularly thorny issue was that of mixed bathing, men and women using the same facilities at the same time. While many bathhouses had separate sections for men and women, or designated different hours for each sex, the practice of mixed bathing did occur in some places and at certain times. and it was a constant source of anxiety for those concerned with public morality. They saw it as a blatant invitation to temptation, adultery, and all manner of scandalous behavior. Emperor Hadrian, in the 2nd century AD, famously issued an edict attempting to ban mixed bathing, which suggests it was a prevalent enough practice to warrant imperial attention. However, enforcing such edicts across the vast empire, in thousands of bathhouses, was likely an ongoing challenge. Mixed bathing, was it a delightful opportunity for social mingling between the sexes in a relaxed setting, or a one-way ticket to moral ruin and societal collapse? Depends entirely on which grumpy philosopher or satirical poet you happen to read that day. It's important to remember that not all baths were created equal. The grand imperially funded thermae in Rome might have been subject to more oversight and maintained a generally more decorous atmosphere. However, smaller, privately owned balnea, particularly those in less reputable parts of a city or in notoriously luxurious and decadent resort towns like Baiae on the Bay of Naples, could gain quite a reputation. These were the establishments whispered about, the kind of place your stern Uncle Marcus might warn you about, but where all the interesting, if slightly scandalous, characters seem to congregate. Oh, I'm just popping down to the baths of Shady Endeavors for the excellent mineral water. I assure you, purely for my health. Roman literature, a mainstream historical fact that provides us with so much, albeit biased, information about daily life, frequently uses the baths as a backdrop or a symbol when critiquing Roman decadence, excessive luxury, and perceived moral decline. Satirists like Martial and Juvenal paint vivid, if often exaggerated, pictures of the follies and vices on display, the vain old woman trying to appear young, the lecherous man eyeing the bathers, the ostentatious displays of wealth, the general moral laxity. Later, early Christian writers also took aim at the baths, viewing them as places of pagan indulgence and worldly vanity, contrasting them with the spiritual purity they advocated. Among the more quirky or fringe concerns, or perhaps realities, were the activities of certain bath attendants. While most were hard-working individuals simply doing their jobs, stoking furnaces, cleaning, assisting bathers, some less scrupulous alipte masseurs or other attendants might offer services that went well beyond a simple rub-down or strigiling, essentially acting as go-betweens or even providing sexual services themselves. You might also find suggestive graffiti scratched into a secluded wall, little illicit scribblings hinting at secret rendezvous or forbidden desires, a stark contrast to the grand mythological mosaics elsewhere. Now, it's crucial to approach these accounts with a critical eye. Historians and classicists continue to debate how widespread genuine debauchery actually was in the majority of public thermae, versus how much the literary accounts represent moralistic exaggeration. Common satirical tropes designed to entertain and shock, or the genuine anxieties of a conservative elite about social change, and the blurring of traditional boundaries in these very public, very popular spaces. The satirists, after all, were in the business of highlighting the worst aspects of society for comedic or critical effect. They weren't necessarily objective journalists. However, it's undeniable that the potential for less than virtuous behavior existed. The Roman baths, in their immense popularity and accessibility, mirrored Roman society as a whole, a complex tapestry of virtue and vice, order and chaos, public decorum and private desires. While for most, they were a cherished and beneficial daily ritual, they also, inevitably, reflected the full spectrum of human behavior, offering a steamy, echoing stage for not just the laudable aspects of Roman life, but for its occasional scandals and moral panics as well. Now, after we've peeked behind the curtain at some of the scandals and moral panics that occasionally bubbled up in the bathhouses of Rome itself, those steamy arenas of both virtue and vice as we just explored, you might be forgiven for wondering if this whole elaborate bathing culture was just a phenomenon confined to the heart of the empire. Was it all just sophisticated gossip, political intrigue, and debates over mosaic designs within the city walls of Rome itself? Far from it. This bathing bug, this absolute Roman necessity for a daily soak, a good strigiling, and a thorough social catch-up, spread like wildfire to practically every corner of Rome's vast and diverse domain, from the misty hills of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of Syria. The spread of bathhouses was, in many ways, a key marker of Romanization. As the legions marched and administrators set up shop in conquered territories, they brought Roman customs and amenities with them, and baths were always high on the list. The construction of a public thermae, often funded by the local Roman governor or wealthy local elites eager to curry favor and display their Roman credentials, was a very visible sign that a town was becoming part of the Roman world. It was a powerful tool of cultural assimilation, offering a taste of Roman leisure and hygiene that many local populations, over time, came to embrace. Imagine yourself traveling across this immense empire. If you found yourself in Roman Britain, you'd discover bathhouses remarkably well adapted to the rather less balmy climate. Here, the efficiency of the Hipparcos system we talked about earlier was absolutely paramount. Building a Roman bath in Britain. Step 1, probably double the allocation of wood for the Prefernium. Step 2, try to convince the shivering locals that the tepidarium is meant to be pleasantly warm, not just slightly less freezing than a Tuesday in February. You'd find impressive examples like the magnificent baths at Aquae Sulis, modern-day bath, built around natural hot springs sacred to a local deity who was cleverly merged with the Roman goddess Minerva. Further north, along Hadrian's Wall, even the auxiliary soldiers stationed in remote forts like Chesters or Housesteads had their own sturdy bathhouses, a vital amenity for cleanliness, health, and morale. Journey south to Gaul, modern-day France and parts of Germany, and you'd see grand bath complexes in major cities like Lutetia Paris, Lugdunum Lyon, or Augusta Treverorum Trier, the latter boasting some of the largest imperial baths outside Rome itself. Here, Roman bathing often integrated with pre-existing Celtic traditions of sacred springs and water cults, creating a unique blend. Cross the Pyrenees into Hispania, Spain, and Portugal, and you'd find baths renowned for their stunningly intricate mosaics, reflecting the wealth and artistic flair of the Iberian provinces. Venture across the Mediterranean to North Africa, to thriving Roman cities like Leptis Magna in Libya or Timgad in Algeria, and you'd encounter remarkably well-preserved bath complexes. Here, engineers adapted designs to the hotter, drier climate, with perhaps a greater emphasis on cooler rooms and careful water conservation, even while providing the full bathing experience. The social dynamics might have differed too, reflecting the diverse local cultures, Berber, Punic, Greek, all mingling under Roman rule. You might even find a bath in the Egyptian part of the empire decorated with mosaics that subtly incorporate local motifs, perhaps a stylized lotus alongside the usual dolphins. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in a Roman province, well, you still mostly do as the Romans do. But with a local twist, in the eastern provinces, Greece, Asia Minor, modern Turkey, Syria, and Egypt, Roman bath culture encountered and often merged with the long-established Greek tradition of the gymnasium, which itself typically included bathing facilities. The Romans had initially borrowed many aspects of their bathing habits from the Greeks, so in these regions it was more of an evolution and an expansion of scale rather than a completely new introduction. Cities like Ephesus, Alexandria, or Antioch boasted numerous large and luxurious thermae, often continuing to be centers of philosophical discussion and athletic training, just as their Greek predecessors had been. A crucial factor in this empire-wide dissemination was the Roman army. This is a mainstream historical fact. The military played an enormous role in spreading bathhouse technology and bathing culture. Thermae castrenses, or military baths, were a standard feature of practically every permanent Roman fort and fortress. For the soldiers, often serving for decades in distant lands, the bathhouse was essential not just for hygiene, critical in preventing disease in crowded barracks, but also for physical recuperation after training, for relaxation, and as a vital social outlet, a place to connect with their comrades and feel a touch of Roman normality far from home. Even on the windswept frontier, facing down restless tribes and enduring harsh conditions, a Roman legionary expected and usually got his hot bath, his oil, his strigil, and a good session of grumbling about the local food or the new centurion. Heard the latest from Segmentum 6, apparently. Old Decimus wears his helmet in the Caldarium. Odd chap. Morale through meticulous exfoliation and shared complaints. These provincial baths, while adhering to the basic Roman model of a sequence of heated rooms and exercise areas, often displayed fascinating local adaptations. Building materials would vary depending on what was locally available. The size and opulence of the baths would naturally reflect the wealth and status of the particular town or military outpost. Decorative motifs in mosaics or frescoes might incorporate local plants, animals, or even deities alongside traditional Roman themes. A quirky tidbit you might discover in some of the more remote frontier baths, particularly those used by auxiliary troops recruited from far-flung corners of the empire, could be graffiti in an unexpected language, or game pieces for local board games scratched into a stone bench. Little signs of soldiers from different backgrounds whiling away their off-duty hours. In places where wood for the hippocaust was scarce, like some windswept outposts, they might have even resorted to burning peat. Archaeologists and historians continue to debate the degree to which the widespread adoption of Roman-style bathing in the provinces represented a genuine, enthusiastic embrace of Roman culture and its perceived benefits by local elites and populations, versus a more pragmatic adoption of a desirable amenity, or even a subtle form of imposed civilizing mission by the Roman authorities. Was it a pull or a push, or a bit of both? The answer likely varies from region to region. But what is undeniable is the remarkable pervasiveness and adaptability of Roman bath culture. It became one of the most recognizable and enduring symbols of Roman civilization, a testament to their engineering prowess, their understanding of leisure, and their ability to stamp a distinctly Roman way of life onto a vast and varied empire, one steamy, sociable bathhouse at a time. As you've been mentally touring these magnificent bath complexes, from the scorching caldarium where you bravely endured the heat, to the bustling palaestra, remember those energetic ball games we pictured, and marveling at their Roman ubiquity across the vast empire as we just discussed in our previous section, you might have given a fleeting thought to who actually kept these vast, intricate operations running so smoothly day in and day out. It certainly wasn't magic, or some kind of self-cleaning marble that ensured the furnaces roared. The pools were full, the floors were relatively clean, and your toga was mostly safe in the changing room. Behind the scenes, and often right in front of you, was a diverse and hardworking army of staff and attendants, many of whom were the unsung heroes of your daily Roman bath experience. The sheer scale of a large public therme meant that a considerable number of people were required to keep it functioning. Let's start in the hottest, least glamorous part of the operation, the furnace rooms. Here, individuals known as fornicatores, or furnace stokers, toiled in intense heat and grime. Their job was to constantly feed the massive wood-fired furnaces of the Hippocaust system, ensuring a consistent temperature for the heated rooms and pools. It was backbreaking, sweaty, and often dangerous work, essential yet largely invisible to you as a bather enjoying the fruits of their labor. The fornicatores had the hottest job in Rome, quite literally. Perks probably didn't include a window office or dental plan, more like a complimentary, inescapable sauna experience all day long, whether you particularly wanted it or not. Then you had the more general bath attendants, the balneatores. Their duties could be varied. They might assist bathers, help maintain a semblance of order in the crowded rooms, perhaps rent out towels or strigils, and in smaller establishments, they might even be the ones collecting the modest entrance fee at the door. In the apoditerium, the changing room, the capsarii were the cloakroom attendants. Their primary role was to guard the clothes and belongings you left in those open niches. This was a position requiring a degree of trust, as theft, as we've noted, was a perennial concern. A good capsarius would keep a watchful eye, ensuring your toga didn't wander off on someone else's shoulders. The capsarius in the changing room. Your best friend when he accurately remembered which niche contained your slightly less than spotless tunic. Your momentary arch-nemesis if he accidentally handed it to that important-looking senator who vaguely resembled you but was clearly 3 sizes larger and smelled faintly of expensive imported perfume. For more specialized services, you had the elliptae or unctores. These were the oilers and masseurs. After you'd worked up a sweat or emerged from a pool, an ellipta would skillfully apply olive oil to your skin, and if you desired, give you a massage to soothe tired muscles. They might also assist with the strigiling process, scraping away the oil and dirt, though many bathers preferred to do this themselves or have their personal slaves attend to it. And let's not forget the drop assistae, the depilators we encountered earlier, specialists in the art of hair removal, armed with their tweezers or sticky concoctions, ready to help you achieve that perfectly smooth Roman look, often accompanied by your involuntary yelps. Behind the scenes, but equally vital, were the aquarii. These were the staff members responsible for the water systems, maintaining the aqueduct channels that fed the baths, ensuring the cisterns were full, checking the intricate network of lead pipes for leaks, and keeping the drains clear. Given the vast amounts of water flowing through a thermi daily, this was a crucial and ongoing task. And, of course, there were the cleaners. Imagine the daily challenge hundreds, if not thousands of oiled, sweaty bodies passing through, water splashing everywhere, discarded bits of food from those snack vendors, the general detritus of a heavily used public space. The cleaning crews in a Roman bath deserved a triumph of their own, probably involving very large sponges, buckets of water, and an unwavering sense of duty. In the larger, more organized establishments, there would have been a curator or manager, perhaps a public official or someone who had leased the bath complex from the city or state. This individual would oversee the entire operation, manage the staff, handle the finances including income from fees and possibly rent from vendors, and ensure the buildings and equipment were kept in good repair. Now, it's a sobering mainstream historical fact that a significant portion of this essential labor force in Roman cities, including those who toiled in the baths, consisted of enslaved people. Their work was absolutely fundamental to the functioning of these large-scale public amenities, but their individual lives and experiences are often poorly documented in the elite literary sources that form much of our historical record. The fornicatores sweating by the furnaces, many of the cleaners, some of the attendants. These were often individuals with little to no personal freedom, their lives dedicated to ensuring the comfort and leisure of others. Freedmen, former slaves who had gained their freedom, also made up a part of the workforce, perhaps in roles with more skill or responsibility, like experienced masseurs or overseers. Working conditions likely varied enormously. For an enslaved furnace stoker, life was undoubtedly harsh and short. For a skilled Ellipta who was a freedman and perhaps built up a loyal clientele, the situation might have been considerably better, offering a degree of autonomy and income. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some capsarii, the cloakroom attendants, gained notorious reputations, not just for potential negligence, but for actively colluding with thieves or demanding substantial tips to ensure your belongings were actually safe. One can imagine a nervous bather eyeing the capsarius with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Perhaps some attendants had their own specialized tools or techniques, a particular blend of massage oil favored by an ellipta, or specific calls and chants used by the fornicatores to coordinate the intense rhythm of stoking the different furnaces that might feed various sections of the Hippocaust. Social historians and archaeologists continue to diligently piece together the daily lives, working conditions, and social status of these diverse bathhouse staff members, particularly the enslaved individuals. As direct written testimonies from these people are exceptionally rare, scholars must rely on clues from inscriptions, perhaps a dedication by a group of bath attendants, occasional, often fleeting, mentions in literature, and a broader understanding of Roman labor practices and social hierarchies. Their interactions with you, the bather, would have ranged from the almost invisible like the stoker you never saw, to the very personal like the masseur or depilator. These interactions would always be colored by the vast differences in social status, a constant undercurrent beneath the seemingly egalitarian atmosphere of the baths. So, as you mentally recline in that steamy Roman warmth, remember the complex human machinery, the many hands, seen and unseen, that made your daily ritual of cleanliness, health, and social connection possible. Now that we've met the often unseen army of fornicatores, diligently stoking the furnaces, and the ever-watchful capsari in the changing rooms who kept the bath oils flowing, and the togas mostly accounted for, as we did in the last section, let's tune our ears to what the Romans themselves, the writers, the poets, the philosophers, and even the everyday scrawlers of graffiti, actually had to say about this central daily ritual. What did they truly think of their beloved, bustling, and sometimes bewildering Thermae? Their voices, preserved in texts and inscriptions, offer us a fascinating, if sometimes contradictory, glimpse into their lived experience. Perhaps one of the most vivid, and certainly one of the crankiest, accounts comes from Seneca the Younger, the Stoic philosopher who had the misfortune, at least from his perspective, of living in an apartment directly above a public bathhouse. His letters paint an almost painfully clear picture of the sheer cacophony. Seneca, the original grumpy old man yelling at the kids to get off his lawn. Except his lawn was a public bath and the kids were basically all of Rome enjoying itself. He complains, like with eloquent exasperation, about the assortment of sounds which are enough to make me hate my very powers of hearing. He details the grunts and wheezing of men exercising with lead weights in the palaestra, the sharp slap of the masseur's hand on a shoulder, the brawling of a pickpocket caught in the act, the man who likes to hear his own voice in the bath, the enthusiastic and presumably off-key singer, and the deafening splash of someone jumping into the pool. And who could forget his description of the hair plucker? A truly quirky and memorable tidbit, the hair plucker with his shrill, penetrating cry, that he may be noticed never silent except when he is plucking armpits and making his victim yell instead. Seneca's account, while filtered through his stoic desire for tranquility and his disapproval of what he saw as excessive indulgence, gives us an unparalleled, almost visceral sense of the sheer, unadulterated noisiness and busyness of a Roman bath. Then you have the witty, observant epigrams of Martial. He was like the gossip columnist and social satirist of ancient Rome, and the baths were one of his favorite hunting grounds for material. His short, sharp poems capture a cast of memorable bathhouse characters, the man who recites terrible poetry to a captive audience in the pools, the old woman trying desperately to look young with cosmetics that run in the steam, the social climber trying to attach himself to wealthier patrons, the athlete overly proud of his physique. Martial's verses are filled with the vanities, the absurdities, and the everyday human dramas that played out against the backdrop of the Thermae. Spotted. One might imagine Martial tweeting had Twitter existed in first-century Rome. Senator Putin's attempting to impress a new acquaintance with his less-than-impressive strigiling technique in the caldarium. Awkward Nextiyaja Roman baths, Jack's social fail. Juvenal, another powerful satirist, also frequently used the baths as a setting to critique what he saw as the decadence and moral failings of Roman society. His satires might describe the gluttony of those who would vomit so they could continue feasting at dinner parties after a bath, or the effeminate behavior of some men, or the general erosion of traditional Roman virtues amidst the luxury and idleness of the bathing establishments. For Juvenal, the baths could be a symbol of Rome's decline from a republic of stern farmers into an empire of soft, pleasure-seeking urbanites. However, not all literary accounts were so critical. Pliny the Younger, in his letters, often presents a more civilized and appreciative view. He describes his own private villa baths with pride, detailing their pleasant features and the enjoyable leisure they afforded. When he mentions public baths, it's often in the context of civilized conversation, intellectual pursuits, or the simple pleasure of relaxation among friends. For Pliny and his circle, the baths could be places of refined leisure, far removed from the raucous scenes described by Seneca or the vices satirized by Martial and Juvenal. Inscriptions found at bath sites across the empire also testify to a more positive public perception. Communities would erect plaques expressing profound gratitude to the emperor or a local benefactor for building or renovating their baths, highlighting the benefits of health, pleasure, and civic pride these institutions brought. We also have the voices of medical writers like Celsus and Galen, whom we've mentioned before. Their detailed prescriptions for therapeutic bathing, recommending specific water temperatures, durations, and even particular bath complexes for treating various ailments, show a clear medical endorsement of the practice, viewing the baths not as dens of iniquity, but as valuable tools for maintaining health and well-being. But what about the voices of ordinary, everyday Romans, those who didn't write philosophical treatises or satirical poems? For a glimpse into their thoughts, we can sometimes turn to a more humble source graffiti, scratched onto the plaster of less formal areas of the baths, or perhaps on tiles. These fleeting messages can be incredibly revealing. You might find simple declarations like, "Gaius was here," or Secundus bathed on the Ides of March. Sometimes there are crude drawings, boasts about athletic prowess, complaints about the service, or even declarations of love or longing. The water in the Frigidarium is really cold today, and Marcus owes me 5 denarii, the authentic, unvarnished voice of the Roman bather, probably misspelled, right next to a hastily drawn caricature of a gladiator. These scribblings offer a direct, unmediated connection to the common people who use these facilities daily. It's a mainstream historical fact, however, that the vast majority of Roman literary sources that describe daily life, including the vibrant culture of the baths, come from the perspective of a relatively small, wealthy, male, educated elite. This means our understanding of the experiences of women, the urban poor, enslaved individuals working in the baths, or people in the far-flung provinces is often filtered through their eyes, or less directly represented. We hear Seneca's complaints about the noise, but not the song of the bath attendant he mentions. We read Martial's mockery of social types, but rarely the inner thoughts of those being mocked. Classicists and social historians, therefore, continue to debate how to interpret these often satirical or moralizing literary accounts of Roman baths. How much do they reflect the everyday reality for most bathers? And how much represents carefully constructed literary exaggeration, well-worn satirical tropes designed to entertain or make a philosophical point, or the anxieties of a particular social class about changing customs and public behavior? It's a complex puzzle, trying to separate the reality from the rhetoric. What emerges, though, is a rich and varied tapestry of voices. From the high-minded philosopher seeking quiet contemplation to the street-smart poet looking for his next subject. From the grateful citizen thanking a benefactor to the anonymous bather scratching their name on a wall. The Romans clearly had a lot to say and feel about their baths. These institutions were undeniably central to their way of life, sources of immense pleasure, vital social connection, and, for some, considerable irritation or moral concern. After hearing all those vibrant, sometimes cantankerous, Roman voices echoing from the past, from Seneca grumbling about the noise to Martial penning witty epigrams about the bathhouse characters, as we did in Section 13, and after immersing ourselves so thoroughly in the daily ritual of the Thermae, it's a rather sobering thought to consider that this incredibly central, deeply ingrained institution didn't last forever. Like all empires, even the daily Roman habit of soaking, strigiling, and socializing amid steam and marble eventually faced its long, slow twilight in the western part of the Roman world. The bustling, noisy, fragrant heart of Roman urban life would, over centuries, gradually fall silent. This decline wasn't a sudden event, not like a switch being flicked off. It was a complex, creeping process, unfolding at different speeds in different regions from roughly the 3rd or 4th century AD onwards, particularly in the Western Roman Empire. Several interwoven factors contributed to the fading of this once ubiquitous culture. Firstly, there were significant economic pressures. Remember those magnificent aqueducts bringing in rivers of water, and those fuel-hungry hypocaust systems that kept the rooms so delightfully warm. They were engineering wonders, as we marveled at earlier, but they were also incredibly expensive to build and, crucially, to maintain. As the urban economies of many Western Roman cities began to falter, as trade routes were disrupted, and as civic wealth diminished, finding the funds, the materials, and the skilled labor to keep these colossal structures in good repair became increasingly difficult. Inflation and the debasement of currency didn't help either. Turns out, funding a city-sized luxury spa complex with underfloor heating for virtually everyone gets a bit tricky when the imperial treasury is looking emptier than a wine amphora after a particularly enthusiastic legionaries' party. Then came the political and social instability that characterized the later Roman Empire in the West. Centuries of relative peace, the Pax Romana, gave way to internal strife, civil wars, and increasing pressure from barbarian groups along the frontiers. These conflicts often led to direct damage or destruction of vital infrastructure. The aqueducts, those vulnerable lifelines, were prime targets. A mainstream historical fact is that the cutting of the aqueducts supplying the city of Rome itself by Gothic invaders during the protracted Gothic War in the 6th century AD dealt a catastrophic blow to the functioning of the capital's massive Thermae. Without a reliable, copious water supply, these baths simply couldn't operate. Cities shrank, populations shifted, and the centralized imperial power that had once funded and organized the construction and upkeep of these public amenities weakened considerably. Perhaps one of the most profound and often discussed factors was the rise of Christianity and the accompanying shift in moral and social attitudes. As we touched upon when discussing scandals, early Christian writers and leaders often viewed the public baths with suspicion, if not outright hostility. They criticized the perceived decadence, the emphasis on bodily pleasure, the public nudity which they associated with pagan shamelessness, and the potential for immoral behavior. The focus of the new faith was more on spiritual purity and asceticism, rather than on the elaborate care and indulgence of the physical body that the baths represented. Suddenly, lounging around naked with hundreds of your fellow citizens, discussing philosophy, getting oiled, and enjoying esteem wasn't necessarily seen as the peak of civilized leisure anymore. It was increasingly framed by some as, "Brother, shouldn't you perhaps be praying for your immortal soul? Or at the very least considering some trousers?" This changing religious and moral landscape gradually influenced social norms. The communal, often boisterous, and sometimes mixed-gender environment of the public thermae became less aligned with the evolving ideals of Christian modesty and piety. While hygiene was still valued, the church tended to promote more private forms of bathing, or bathing within monastic communities, stripped of the lavish public spectacle and social intermingling of the old Roman style. Practical challenges also mounted. Those sophisticated Hipparcos systems required constant maintenance and an enormous, unending supply of fuel, primarily wood. Deforestation around major cities had already become an issue in earlier periods, and as trade and supply lines faltered, securing enough wood to heat these vast complexes became a monumental task. As the specialized knowledge required to repair intricate plumbing, complex furnaces, and massive vaulted structures was lost or dispersed, many bathhouses simply fell into disrepair and became unusable. It's important to note, however, that this decline was far more pronounced in the Western Roman Empire. In the East, the Roman Empire, often referred to by historians as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for another 1,000 years. And with it, bath culture persisted, albeit sometimes in modified forms. The tradition of public bathing remained strong in cities like Constantinople, and these Byzantine baths, in turn, significantly influenced the development of the Islamic hammam, or Turkish bath, preserving and transforming elements of the classical bathing ritual for centuries more. But in much of Western Europe, by the 6th or 7th century AD, the era of the grand public thermae was largely over. The magnificent structures often fell into ruin, their marble stripped for other buildings, their vast halls collapsing. A quirky and somewhat poignant tidbit is that some of these abandoned Roman baths, with their echoing chambers and crumbling hippocausts, were later believed by local populations to be haunted places, or became associated with all sorts of folklore and legends. Their imposing ruins certainly sparked the imagination. In other cases, as communities adapted to new realities, these once glorious buildings were repurposed. Perhaps a section converted into a church, parts used as fortifications, or, more humbly, their sturdy walls providing shelter for squatters and their livestock. Imagine your local luxury spa, a testament to modern indulgence, eventually being turned into a makeshift fortress or, even more ignominiously, a well-ventilated goat pen. It's a bit of a step down from shimmering mosaics and statues of emperors, you have to admit. Historians continue to debate the primary driver for the decline of Roman bath culture in the West, carefully weighing the relative impacts of economic collapse, the so-called barbarian invasions and the disruption they caused, the profound shifts in religious and moral ideologies brought about by Christianity, and pressing environmental factors like resource depletion and perhaps even climate change. It was likely a complex interplay of all these elements, a perfect storm that gradually extinguished the fires of the hippocausts and drained the great pools. The daily Roman ritual of social ablution, once a defining feature of an empire, slowly faded into memory, leaving behind impressive ruins as silent witnesses to a lost way of life. And so, we arrive at the end of our journey through the warm, steamy, and incredibly social world of the Roman baths. We've witnessed their grandeur, explored their intricate engineering, partaken in their rituals, navigated their social currents, and even pondered their slow decline in the West. After hearing all those Roman voices, from the grumbling Seneca to the everyday scrawler of graffiti, as we did in the last section, it's clear that the Thermae were far more than just a place to get clean. They were the beating heart of Roman urban life. But even though those magnificent structures largely crumbled or were repurposed centuries ago, you might be surprised at how their echoes resonate even now, particularly in the ways we connect, share information, and build communities. A sort of ancient blueprint for our modern social lives. The Roman baths, at their core, fulfilled a profound human need for what sociologists call third places. Environments outside of our homes, the first place, and our workplaces, the second place, where informal social interaction, relaxation, and a sense of community can flourish. Though the togas and strigils are long gone, that fundamental need for spaces where we can simply be together, share news, and reinforce social bonds is as strong as ever. You can see echoes of the Roman bath's multifaceted role in many aspects of modern life. Consider your favorite bustling cafe, the lively pub down the street, the community center, the local library, the public park, or even your modern gym with its own areas for chatter and connection. These are all descendants, in a way, of the Roman idea of a public space dedicated to well-being and social intercourse. And Ken, of course, there's the most obvious, if less tangible, parallel: our own digital social media. Think about it. The Roman baths were where you went to get the latest news and gossip, right? You'd hear it directly, passed from person to person in the tepidarium or apoditerium. Today, you scroll through your Twitter feed or Facebook updates, a constant stream of information, personal news, and yes, plenty of gossip. Remember all that important networking and deal-making we discussed happening amidst the steam? That's not so different from making connections on LinkedIn, joining professional groups online, or even sealing a casual agreement via email or a messaging app, just with significantly more clothing and less risk of dropping your tablet in a hot pool. The way Romans used the baths to maintain their social presence and status also has its modern counterparts. Being seen at the fashionable Thermae with the right entourage, engaging in witty conversation, it was all part of curating a public persona. Today, you might carefully craft your Instagram profile, share your achievements on Facebook, or build your professional image online. Different methods, perhaps. But that ancient human desire to present ourselves effectively to our peers remains remarkably consistent. So, when you're carefully selecting that perfect profile picture or crafting a witty tweet, just remember your Roman ancestors were doing something thematically similar, just in person, probably naked or nearly so, and with a higher chance of actually bumping into a grumpy senator while doing it. The baths fostered a sense of community through shared experience. Modern online forums, fan groups, or even massive multiplayer games create virtual communities around shared interests, echoing that Roman need to belong and connect. Of course, there are crucial differences. The Roman bath experience was intensely physical, multisensory, and involved face-to-face interaction in a very real, shared space. Our digital interactions are often virtual, asynchronous, and can lack that serendipitous, uncurated quality of bumping into someone unexpectedly. Urban planners and sociologists continue to debate whether modern digital third places can truly replicate the rich, multisensory, and often unplanned social encounters that characterized physical communal spaces like the Roman Thermae, or if something fundamental is indeed lost in the transition to purely virtual environments. But the legacy isn't just conceptual. While the grand Roman Thermae of the West largely faded, bathing traditions continued and evolved. The Turkish hammam and the Arabic bathhouses owe a significant debt to their Roman and Byzantine predecessors, preserving elements of the sequential bathing ritual and the social atmosphere. Further afield, cultures like the Japanese with their onsen hot springs or Scandinavians with their saunas have their own ancient and deeply ingrained bathing traditions that emphasize both health and communal relaxation, sometimes echoing Roman principles. Modern spas, with their focus on health, wellness, and luxurious pampering, are in some ways descendants too, though they often cater to a more private, individual experience rather than the boisterous, public social scene of a Roman therme. You might get the fluffy robes and the calming Enya-esque music, which is lovely. But do they usually have a chap loudly selling sausages next to the aromatherapy pool, or an aspiring poet passionately declaiming his latest epic in the sauna? Probably not. We've definitely lost something in terms of sheer, unadulterated public spectacle. And architecturally, the Romans left their mark. The mainstream historical fact is that the innovative architectural principles of Roman baths, their grand domes, soaring vaulted ceilings, clever use of natural light, and sophisticated heating systems, were studied and emulated by architects centuries later, particularly during the Renaissance and neoclassical periods, when there was a fervent rediscovery of classical antiquity. Think of grand railway stations or public libraries with their vast, airy halls. Some of that design DNA can be traced back to Roman therme. A quirky, but telling, linguistic tidbit is that the very word spa, which we associate with health and water treatments, ultimately derives from the name of the town spa in Belgium, famous for its cold mineral springs since Roman times, though the Romans themselves might have just called such a place aqua waters. And it's no coincidence that many modern fitness centers, perhaps without even consciously realizing the historical precedent, combine exercise facilities with pools, saunas, and steam rooms, directly echoing that Roman integration of physical exertion and therapeutic bathing. So, while the specific institution of the Roman public bath may have largely vanished from Western Europe, the human needs it so brilliantly catered to, for cleanliness, for health, for community, for information, for a place to see and be seen, these are timeless. The Roman thermae in all their steamy, noisy, social glory stand as a testament to a civilization that understood, perhaps better than many, since the vital importance of accessible public spaces for the well-being of its citizens. They were, for a time, the ultimate social network, built of marble, water, and the ceaseless, vibrant hum of human connection. And now, as our exploration of these ancient Roman gathering places gently concludes, let the images of sunlit palaestras and shadowy, steamy caldariums begin to soften and drift away. The murmur of countless Latin conversations, the splash of water in marble pools, the distant cries of vendors, all these sounds can now fade into a comfortable, peaceful quiet. You've journeyed through a world where bathing was an art, a necessity, and a profound social ritual, a daily immersion in the very fabric of Roman life. There are no more historical details to uncover tonight, no more architectural marvels to inspect, no more social customs to dissect. The story of the Roman baths, with all its ingenuity, its grandeur, and its very human complexities, has been told for now. You can let go of these ancient scenes, these echoes from a distant past, and allow your mind to settle into the stillness of your own present moment. Your own bed is a haven of peace, far removed from the bustling energy of a therme or the anxieties of ensuring your toga isn't stolen. As you lie there, feeling the gentle support beneath you, let any lingering thoughts of strigils, hippocausts, or gossiping senators dissolve like steam in the air. The only task remaining is to allow yourself to drift, easily and effortlessly, into a deep and truly restorative sleep. The soft background hum you might have, the gentle weight of your blanket. These are your comforts now. Let the peace of this quiet ending be your companion as you journey into your own sweet dreams.